Hope everyone's having a great weekend, and we're going to start off this weekend with a Patreon listener question. It's a really good one, too. For those who don't know, Patreon listener questions, if you are interested in asking a question that will be read out and fleshed out on the podcast, just be sure to check out the Patreon link below in the description. A lot of cool stuff you could get. And we got a Patreon listener question from MassiveGains. And MassiveGains wants to know, to follow up your talk about celebrating Generation 1 and living during that golden time, I was wondering what you would call the dark time for Transformers, or the worst time to be a fan during that era or the brand. I was old enough to watch Generation 1, but the 90s for me was kind of fuzzy, and I can't really say that I remember much of that. I didn't really start paying attention until the live action movies. All right, so I figured I'd use this, and I think I've talked about this in small little bits and pieces spread across our podcast throughout the many years that we've been on the air. But I feel like this is a good time to kind of have it all in one place under a good segment that people could just share if they need to. Transformers has always either been the thing that everyone wanted to be, or the brand would be trying to be something that the thing was that everyone wanted to be. And I always have like this timeline in my mind of just everything that was going on with the brand from beginning to, like, I don't want to say beginning to end because it'll never end. As Simon Furman says, it never ends. But like what I want to do is I want to kind of like just do a little chronological look at the brand, and then I could show you exactly when it really sucked. Like just when it really was just not a good time to be a Transformer fan. Like that specific year, if you will. So we'll go to the beginning. Like, you know, Transformers came out in 1984, and toy-wise and stuff that was really popular with the boy brand of toys and franchises and products. I mean, if you're looking at like late 70s and then 81, 82, 83, just before Transformers came out, I mean, it was all about Star Wars, He-Man, and G.I. Joe. Like those three brands were just killing it. But in 1984 and 1985, when G1 first started, everything just exploded. And G1 was the number one selling boy brand. Well, Transformers Generation 1 was number one selling boy brand, closely followed by Star Wars and then He-Man back then. And then all the slew of other toy lines that also shared shelving space. But those three were the top three, and Transformers was standing above them all. And everyone was just trying to copy and be Transformers. And it really peaked, I feel, for Generation 1 in 1985. That's when Transformers really was just owning the world at that time. But then in 1987, a little brand called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles finally had its first release of toys, which were, I like to call them budget toys, because they were very cheap in comparison to Transformers and a lot of other toys that were available at the time. They were more in that He-Man price point. And in 1988, when they were in full swing with their cartoon and stuff, they were just, you know, Transformers was already gone and on its way out. Granted, the toy line would continue moving forward, but it was already on a pop culture standpoint and a cartoon standpoint on its way out. And I mean, even Transformers acknowledged their defeat by kind of, again, and this is something that's going to come up through this discussion, Hasbro pivoting with Transformers to make it relevant with what is popular with kids at the time. So in 1987, Ninja Turtles comes out. By 88, it's just the hottest property. And 89, Transformers, in order to kind of, get some of that popularity, they started doing the Pretender shells and the mutant kind of look and the grotesque kind of monster thing to kind of get some of that Ninja Turtle popularity. It didn't help also that same year in 1988, Nintendo would be in full swing in their popularity. Nintendo debuted quietly, and I use the term quietly, debuted quietly in late 85, early 86, but it wasn't until 87, 88 We call it like the Super Mario Bros. 2, the Adventures of Link, when Nintendo was pop culture. When Nintendo was in the news, it was just so ingrained in culture. And it was 1988 when really it first started. And then we would see the Wizard movie not too long after that to really like even cement that even more with Fred Savage and stuff. But Transformers was already kind of on life support at that point. And we'll just kind of jump ahead because I'll get to the dark times. But, then when we talk about, let's say, 1993, which is Generation 2, in August of 93, Power Rangers came out. And so no matter how good Generation 2 could have been, Power Rangers just became the most important property for the boys brand. And again, pop culture phenomenon in the world. And we see Generation 2 trying to take advantage of Power Rangers' popularity, because when Generation 2 was being concepted, they saw that, hey, Bandai of America is going to be bringing over that Sentai brand that's been making gangbusters in Japan for already almost 2 decades. We're going to have to make our Dinobots kind of have that similar kind of color scheme, make some of that, Sentai money. Then you jump forward to the next big boom for Transformers, which was Beast Wars. And that was September of 1996 when the cartoon came out. And, even Beast Wars was playing it safe because they didn't know that they were going to be, another pop culture phenomenon and the best-selling boy brand. And Transformers' return to being the best-selling boy brand in 1998. But Beast Wars played it safe because they were kind of looking at, other pop culture phenomenons. 1993's Jurassic Park with the Velociraptors and the whole beast, prehistoric stuff that was just, again, you can't deny Jurassic Park's mark on pop culture even to this day. And even though Beast Wars would go on to peak in popularity and bring Transformers back into mainstream pop culture in 1998, being the number one best-selling boy brand in 98 with the Transmetals and stuff. But it's just, they were playing it safe. Kenner at the time, it wasn't even Hasbro, because Hasbro was like, oh, we're done with the Transformer brand, we're going to give it to our sister company Kenner. Of course, they, that reverted back not too long after. And, then we jump to 1998, same time when Beast Wars was killing it and was just doing amazing. In September of 1998, this little brand called Pokemon came out. And, I mean, absolutely just anything that we're talking about, past or present, will never reach Pokemon's worldwide, reach. There's nothing like Pokemon. There probably never will be anything like Pokemon. And Beast Wars kind of had to take a step back. And I mean, the only other thing that kind of would get any kind of attention in relation to Pokemon was in 99, you'd have Digimon that would come around and kind of go, hey kids, we got that too. And I mean, it even goes to show how important Pokemon was that in an episode of Beast Machines, you had Jetstorm, quote the phrase, gotta catch 'em all. Just to show just how important that brand was. And I mean, in 2001, Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of had that kind of attention and really brought back the card scene, which really only Magic the Gathering and the Pokemon card game had. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Still is around to this day, another cultural phenomenon. But 2001 also brought about the internet boom. And in 2001, I mean, at that time, to give a Transformer perspective, we just had Robots in Disguise was just, making its debut. In 2002, Beyblade was huge. And that really was, 2002 was a turning point for a lot of things, because that was when Fox launched the Fox Box, which was their all anime kind of thing. Because 2001, 2002 was, I firmly believe, was the beginning of the anime boom. And when you stopped really having these boy brands that would last 2 to 3 years and would be the all-encompassing pop culture icons, to now we have the internet, broadband is easily accessible in everyone's household. You didn't need to have a free phone line, taking up to be able to use the internet. Everyone was having the internet by 2001, 2002. The anime boom was in full swing. Toonami was in full swing on Cartoon Network. Foxbox was doing their thing. And I mean, even Transformers recognizes it by bringing over Armada, also doing a little tie to Pokemon with the collect them all with the mini cons. Transformers just trying to survive, copying what was popular at the time. So, but it wasn't the dark period. And of course, marching forward 2003, 2004, 2005, you have Dragon Ball, Naruto, Gundam Wing, Pokemon still doing its thing. And, it just keeps going and going. And it wasn't until 2007 that really, because, 2004, you had Energon, late 2005, early 2006 was Cybertron. It wasn't until 2007 when the Michael Bay movies come out, did Transformers reach its peaks again and return to being pop culture, and really is held pretty well up to this point. Pretty well. Probably even more so than it ever was during Beast Wars, and more so than it ever was during even 1985, as that's hard to believe. But just it's been up and down recently, but it's never been that terrible. And I mean, Hasbro still to this day, does what it can to copy what's going on with pop culture to egg in on that. Creo was an answer to the Lego stuff doing really well. Bot Shots was an answer. Bakugan was doing huge in 2008, so Bot Shots was implemented a little too late, but Bot Shots was implemented to kind of like get on the Bakugan tabletop thing. Tactics, it's the same thing. They were doing that because of HeroClix. I mean, I could go on and on. Same thing with even the current bots that we have with all the Shopkins and stuff like that. But to answer long-winded history lesson, to answer the question, what was the worst time to be a fan in the brand? And I pinpoint the year of 1992. And 1992, I feel, without a doubt, was the worst time to be a Transformer fan. To give you an idea of a perspective of what 1992 was at the time, we were knee-deep in the return of the arcade boom. Street Fighter II Champion Edition was debuted in March of 1992. After Street Fighter II, the first game, World Warriors, was killing it in the arcades and eating up quarters. Mortal Kombat would make its debut in 1992. And we were also knee-deep in the console war of Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis. So the focus from toys was being pulled away even more as kids wanted consoles and video games and Game Boy and Game Gear. But not only that, we also had the non-sports card boom happen in late 1991, early 1992, of the Marvel trading cards and all these non-sports card stuff really making a lot of money. And also, from a fictional standpoint, was we were already into the third year or the late second year of the comic speculation boom. In October of 91, X-Men number 1 by Jim Lee had come out. And Jim Lee, X-Men number 1, best-selling comic book of all time, just created this huge boom in interest in comic books. So kids were focusing more on, mutants and all of that stuff that weren't Ninja Turtles and the X-books and everything. But you know what also came out in 1992? Let's go to the television screen. Batman the Animated Series in September and X-Men the Animated Series in October. So it was just a brutal year. If you were a rival of any of these brands, video games or whatever, they were just killing it. So what were Transformers doing in 1992? The worst year ever to be a fan. So let's talk cartoons. 0. Nothing. And when I say nothing, I'm talking UK, I'm talking Japan, and I'm talking America. Everything I've been talking to up to this point was a reflection of what was going on in the United States and Canada. But when I talk 92 being the worst year, I'm talking the worst year across the entire globe. You couldn't go anywhere in the world and be a Transformer fan and be smiling. So cartoons, nothing. What about comic books? We'd have 2 issues in the UK of the original Generation 1 Transformer comics, issue 331 and 332. And then it would be canceled. And keep in mind, those UK books, they're a lot smaller. So it was literally a drop of water in the variable ocean of the comic book world. So those 2 books came out at the beginning of 92, and then the comic was canceled. So you had only 2 small little scant books from the UK. Japan. Oh, Japan. Well, Japan had the story pages of Operation Combination and Battlestars, at least. Like, we had Operation Combination, the whole run of it, and Battlestars, the last part of it. But just story pages. 2 little pages folded over with a little bit of art explaining what's going on. And that's it. What about toys? The lifeblood of Transformers, because that's all we had for comics. There was no video games. There was no cartoon. Well, what about toys? Well, unless you were Canadian, you really didn't have Transformer toys in the United States. Because what was going on was in Europe, we got some European exclusives like Boss, Flash, Hurricane, Rotorstorm, Thunderclash. No, I'm forgetting some. The Rescue Force guys. We had those reissues of the Devastator, which would later go on to be those G2 colors. We had Skyquake and Stalker and Talon and Skydive, but literally a handful of figures. I would have to say less than 20. And that was it. And a few of those figures I listed from Europe ended up in Canada. They were released in Canada as a result too. As for America, 0. Nothing. No Transformer figures in 92. And in Japan, well, because of Operation Combination, you got a Guard City box set, 6 Train, 6 Turbo, 6 Builder, Battle Gaia, Skyquake also kind of was released. You got same thing like Boss and Flash, and all of them were localized over there as I think it was Fire Road and Mach Road and Checkered Road and Moon Jet and Sky Jet. Like, they all had Japanese names. So all those UK toys that I just mentioned were ported over to Japan. But that was it. So to be a Transformer fan in 92, you had nothing. If you were in Europe, you had 20 toys you could have pulled from, 2 comic books, and that's it. If you were in Japan, you got some of the leftovers from Europe, some repaints of Generation 1 stuff, some new MicroMasters, and it's some story pages, which were literally, like, if you added it up, let's see, 9 story pages, and each story page had 2 pages to them with some supplemental, but the main bulk of the story. So you had like 18 pages of fiction for the entire year. Imagine. If you don't count the Battlestars one. So, okay, so let's say 20 pages for the whole year. It was brutal. There was just 1992 was just the worst year to be a Transformer fan. And the only other good thing that I can mention about it is that in 91, 92, CDs were becoming very predominant as a form of musical media. And so the original 86 movie had its debut on compact disc in 1992. So that's like the one good thing that we could really say about it, was that, hey, if you were someone who wore out your vinyl record of the 86 movie or your tape cassette from the Scotty Bros, here's the CD now, so you can at least listen to The Touch and Dare and Attack on Autobot City, or Autobot Decepticon Battle, excuse me. So yeah, it was a brutal year. It's crazy because 1991, at least you had, the Action Masters, you had the tail end of that kind of stuff, the classics, G1 stuff, and it's called Classics in the UK, the gold packaging stuff was at least kind of finding its way out there. We still had at least comic books, from the Marvel end in America. 91 would at least have a few things. 92 would be nothing. And 93, well, of course, we're talking, Generation 2 here. So that's a big return in a lot of ways. Not a successful return, but a return. So I would say 1992. But again, that's why I wanted to paint the big picture of things, because there's a reason why 92 was just not a year for Transformer fans, because that console war, the arcade boom, cartoons were just killing it. Comic book speculation boom. It was just, kids were distracted with a lot of other stuff. No one was missing Transformers in 1992 when they had Wolverine and Fatalities and Ryu and the Street Fighter crew. And there was just so much. And Genesis does what Nintendo don't. It's, even though I was a Nintendo guy, it was just nutty. So long answer short, 1992 was the dark times, or the worst time to be a Transformer fan. So thank you for the question, MassiveGains. Once again, amazing stuff. So if you're interested in asking a question, be sure to check Patreon below.